Welcome to the Visually Hidden Selects podcast, where we discuss an independent approach to the art of cinema and explore the subtext of various featured films. My name is Peter O'Brien, and I am an independent filmmaker, author, and musician.
My name is David Bendler. I'm a film and stage actor and a pop culture enthusiast.
I'm Anne Milleville, a French screenwriter and producer.
This week's VHS selection was Once Upon a Time in the West from 1968, directed by Sergio Leone and starring Claudia, Cardinale, Henry Fonda, Charles Bronson, and Jason Robards. This is one that really is kind of a benchmark in the genre. And if you have not seen Once Upon a Time in the West, I strongly encourage you to head over to the Visually Hidden YouTube channel, subscribe so you don't miss any future recommendations, check out the VHS video on Once Upon a Time in the West, watch the movie, and then come on back to the podcast because we will be discussing it openly with spoilers. Here we go. I didn't see this film until it came out on DVD in 2003. At that time, I was really a big fan of the Dollars trilogy. I loved them growing up. I had them on DVD. I watched them very regularly. And so this was kind of exciting because it was like new old stock. You know what I mean? Like the movie had been around for 35 years at that point, but I had never gotten a chance to see it. So for me, it was very exciting. And it was a little weird that first time because you have all these expectations coming off of the Clint Eastwood movies. And this one is kind of approaching the genre and the story from a totally different direction, which is something that I've come to appreciate about this film as time has gone on. You know, when you first watch this movie, it really kind of skews expectations. And if you're very used to conventional Westerns like Tombstone or even High Noon, you know, like those like classic Westerns, it takes elements from those, but then it turns them on its side. And that ties into the title Once Upon a Time because it's this fable, it's this fairy tale, it's this like unclear picture of history. And so things look familiar, they seem familiar, but there's just something a little off about this particular story. And it does have this very kind of almost like dreamlike sense about it when you're watching it. There's something almost ethereal going on in the subtext of this film. And it's just one that I've grown to love over the years to the point where it might be my favorite Western simply because it plays with the genre in a very fresh way. It's not conventional. It's not typical. It's not by the numbers. But this movie played for 2 to 4 years straight in Paris in a single theater. So clearly the Parisians love this movie. How did you feel about it?
I heard about this movie, of course, it's very famous here, but I didn't watch it before. So my first impression about it, it's like it's what I call a cerebral movie. It's the kind of movie you can be a passive spectator in front of it, otherwise you get bored. You really need to intellectualize the situations, and it gets really interesting if you do so. But yeah, of course, it's really famous here, and especially Claudia Cardinale, she's really famous in France. So I knew about it, but I'm not really interested in Western. I say that, but to be frank, I don't know much of them. So why not now watching more Westerns in the future? But it was really a great experience, really interesting. For me, it was more than a Western. It's real cinema, what I watch. The film of Sergio Leone. It's real cinema. You have art. You have, as I said, intellectualization. You have a lot said in silences and in just eyes expressions. So I really enjoyed watching it, even if it's really a long film again. I think you try to kill me with your long movies, but it was a great experience.
There's a longer version, I believe. I believe there's a 3-hour version or a 3-hour and 17-minute version. I think that was actually the final version. Then they trimmed it down to 2 hours and 45 minutes. So yeah, it's a lot, but as you said, it's very engaging. Like it holds your attention and it keeps unfolding in new and exciting ways. And so I don't think it's a chore to watch the way some movies and even some shorter movies can be.
Yeah, I agree.
I'd always heard of it, and the first time I had an experience with it, I was taking a screenwriter's class in Manhattan, and the teacher brought in the old VCR and TV and showed the opening, waiting for the train to arrive. And the purpose of the lesson was, how do you create tension and draw in interest? And it worked because I went out and I bought the movie blind because they only showed the opening until Charles Bronson arrives. I was like, well, now I got to see the rest of this movie. Got to see what happens. So this is my, I think, third time watching this film. And the first time I saw it, I was blown away by it. I was like, this is awesome. I don't buy many movies blind, but I'm glad I bought this one blind. And yeah, it was fun revisiting it.
One of the things that really stood out to me right away with regard to the opening sequence and to the film in general is the cinematography, just the framing and the composition and the angles. Everything really kind of hits the ground running in that opening sequence. And Sergio Leone's other films, they really have a very strong visual presentation and a very strong visual legacy. And in this one, I think he just kind of heightens it and then once again kind of skews it a little bit and takes it into a different direction. And he's utilizing the camera to kind of assist in that fantastic way of looking at things.
It informs the audience of the feel that they're going for without beating you over the head with it. It's like trying to get you into that state. It's a textural thing. And that's one of the things I found very impressive upon rewatching this movie again now. It felt like a 4D type of feel. Like you felt like you could feel the sweat on the guys, and the flies on his mouth. That drives me crazy. Like, what that feels like. Sitting out there sweating, the bees coming down. It's hot. Your clothes are sticking to you. And you kind of get all that just from the visuals.
The cinematography, there's so much going on in the frame that it takes time to take all that in. But because there's so much going on, you're engaged throughout. That's another reason why it's long, but it doesn't feel long because there's so much happening in the frame as things are moving through it, and there's so much to drink in while you're watching it that the shot may linger for 20 seconds, 30 seconds, 40 seconds, but the whole time your eye is eating up every single inch of that frame and every single inch of depth within that frame.
I've seen movies that have tried to do that thing where they'll stay on a character for a reaction, and man, it just doesn't work. Here is one of those times where it does work.
You understand the rhythm of the film because it's quite slow, but you understand that it's really artistic to see each villain in the corner surrounding this poor guy, this poor ship station guy. You understand the violence without any weapon, without blood, but just with the silence, because they don't say anything during that scene. But it's quite violent anyway. And that's the power of this movie. It's a violent story, but it's told with intelligence, modesty, subtlety, and it catch you, and that's what I really loved in this movie. Even if you don't like Western movies or very male movies, because definitely it's a male movie, you can find something artistic in it, and it's really catchy. And just the lines also, you don't have many lines, but the few lines you have, they're really catchy also. It's punchy. I love the lines of Cheyenne when he just says, not only he plays, he can shoot too, about harmonica. And just this simple sentence, it means a lot in the moment, and you have many lines like that during the movie. So definitely it's mind-blowing.
The story was conceived and developed by Sergio Leone, but he also worked with Bernardo Bertolucci and Dario Argento, who most people know as the Giallo Italian slasher pioneer. And here he is, one of his first film credits is co-writing the story for Once Upon a Time in the West. And then Leone worked on the script with Sergio Donati, who he wrote Good, the Bad, the Ugly with, but they all speak Italian and they all write Italian. And this is an American production with American actors for the most part in the starring roles. So they need English. So they bring in a guy named Mickey Knox, who is actually the namesake for Woody Harrelson's character in Natural Born Killers. So you can see how much Quentin Tarantino loves this movie, that he's pulling references from the crew of it into his universe. But Mickey Knox was an American actor who lived and worked in Europe, and so he would often work as a dialect coach or a dialogue coach or a dialogue translator. That's kind of where the greatness comes from, is like those five men just working together. And again, they loved Westerns, which is an American genre. So they just kind of cherry picked some of their favorite moments or sequences or locations, and then they just kind of like turned them on their side and shot it upside down through a different kind of lens, through a foreign lens, so to speak. Yeah, I think the writing is really strong. Again, the story, it just unfolds in such a way that there's a lot of twists and turns, and you don't necessarily expect them, which I find very engaging as an audience member, and very inspiring as a filmmaker and as a writer, just to think about like, oh yeah, like I didn't see that coming. And there were a couple of times that happened in this film.
I think it's a good example of being economical with your dialogue. Some movies feel the need just to keep throwing dialogue in, throwing dialogue in, throwing dialogue in. And sometimes you see these films where you're just like, oh my God, why are they? It's just, you don't need all that, and here's a prime example of you just need what you need to tell the story.
In Europe, we don't talk much. We have many moments with silence, and I mean, we talk much in real life, but not in cinema. And I feel it's more powerful when you have a silence and a specific eye expression, as I said. So this movie is a great example that we can take the American genre, Western, but to shoot it the European way, and it works. So that's why maybe we don't have much dialogue, and we try to be efficient in the dialogue, because that's the way we do in Europe.
Now that I think about it, it's not unlike City Lights, Charlie Chaplin's work. That sort of thing. A lot of visuals, a lot of, in the face and the emotions. This, movie could have very easily been a silent film, and you still would have got pretty close to the same desired effect.
Well, when you think about it, I mean, silent films had dialogue. You see the characters and the actors speaking, and they put the text up on the screen and the cards. It's kind of that same approach, though. It's like it's favoring the action and the emotion over the spoken dialogue. And that's just classic filmmaking. That's the foundation of the art form, really, is telling the story with images and telling the story with pictures. And this is just a great example of it carrying forward into a more contemporary presentation.
We talk about cinematography. I think my favorite shot in the film is when the camera pulls back on the little boy with the harmonica in his mouth, and we see the entire landscape of, we see his situation, we see the whole backdrop. I mean, that's
oh yeah,
that's a beautiful shot.
That's an amazing shot, and the way it's revealed in the scene and what it tells you about the characters and about the story without a single word, just using the images to tell the story. And it tells a very big story in that one shot. And it's just the way it's set up and then the way it's executed. It is masterful. And that's the discipline, and that's the art, and that's the craft and the style that really is signature Leone. And partly, probably because of the European influence and the cultural aspect, but also just utilizing the image, telling the story with images rather than dialogue, I think is a real strength of him as a filmmaker and of this film in particular. Because there are some really great scenes and really great exchanges, especially with Henry Fonda's character. He pretty much interacts with everybody one-on-one, face-to-face at one point or another, and he crushes in this movie. Oh my God, I could just talk for hours about the greatness that is Henry Fonda as Frank in Once Upon a Time in the West. I'm going to reel it in for the sake of everybody, but I will say this though, Anne, because you had said that this is a guy's movie, and the first time I went over to my wife's house when we were first hanging out, she had this movie on her shelf, and that's why I married her.
That's a good reason.
I was like, wow, this is the girl for me. But we would be shortchanging the film experience if we did not mention Ennio
Mhm.
Morricone's score, which is really the other half of this story. And that's, I think, where a lot of the audio accompaniment, the absence of dialogue, is kind of substituted in this film by that amazing score.
Yeah.
It's really just 4 pieces of music, but then they are kind of woven together and overlap in such a fantastic way that they stand alone and they work together so well. I love the way Harmonica's theme and Frank's theme meld in that final sequence.
The score, man, has got to be one of the most dynamic scores I've probably ever heard. I mean, just the highs and lows of this thing, beautiful. And it invokes so many different emotions. When that guitar kicks in, these guys are fucking rock stars. I mean, that score just makes them look like the coolest guys that ever walked the face of the earth. And I mean, Henry Fonda's got such a great swagger in this, and I personally love his costume. Out of all the costumes, his costume's my favorite. It's just, he just looks like $1,000,000. I mean, he just looks like a guy who doesn't give a shit. Got ice water in his veins, and just to see that face off at the end and that music just kicks in, man. It affects you. It's powerful stuff.
It's telling the story, I think, in a deeper level, because it's really getting to like the heart and the soul of the characters and the situation, where it's like you could look at Jill, and she's this beautiful woman, and she's, she has these very nice dresses and everything, but then you hear that song, Jill's America, and you hear that vocal performance throughout it, and that's Jill's soul, that's her heart, that's what she's like yearning for. She's yearning for this fresh start, this idea, this American dream, and that's what she's moving out west to pursue, which unfortunately she doesn't get to do. And so then there's that heartbreaking tone. So when you watch the movie and you listen to the music, there's all this subtext that's like woven into the story and the characters through the music. I put this one in my top 5 scores, probably. It does what all great scores are supposed to do, which is elevate the story, not just accompany the story.
I concur with that.
And you have also what I call the camaraderie music, the friendship music. When you have the banjo, I'm not sure it's a banjo, I'm really bad in music, but banjo and whistling, mostly for the scenes with Cheyenne
Mhm.
and Harmonica. I love that music so much. And especially when Cheyenne dies, it's fantastic because it stops. And when he really falls down because it's his last breath, you have the last whistling. It's really emotional. When I watched it, I had the goosebump. It was really, it's really part of the films. The music is at one with the film. And as you said, for the harmonica music, it speeds up and it slows down sometimes in accordance with Charles Bronson's emotional state.
Harmonica's theme is very kind of haunting and almost a little bit chilling. And I was wondering, what did you guys get from the character of Harmonica? Because I always kind of saw him as like almost like a phantom, like a wraith, like coming after Frank. And I always got a sense that, yeah, he was almost like a phantom, like he's almost a ghost kind of a character. And if you watch the movie and you look at the back of his jacket, it does look like he has bullet holes sewn up in the back of his jacket, as if he was shot in the back. And when you watch the scene where his brother is standing on his shoulders in the noose and he just drops, it almost implies that he was shot in the back that left his brother to hang. And so now he's almost a ghost like character.
I have not watched this nearly as many times as you have, but that's an interesting. I'll look for that next time I go back and check it out.
And now a word from our sponsor.
This podcast is brought to you by Visually Hidden Selects. If you're looking for a spoiler-free recommendation of a classic film with professional analysis and insight, check out Visually Hidden Selects, exclusively on the Visually Hidden YouTube channel.
I love how throughout the movie, Harmonica is just rattling off names of men that Frank has killed.
Mhm.
Like he is haunting him in a very deliberate way, but is he actually haunting him, I think, is the question. Like, is he actually some type of wraith character that's coming after him? And that just ties into the whole fantasy fable, once upon a time aspect of this story.
Yeah, to answer your question, for me, the harmonica music is made to make this character mysterious and to understand that he has nostalgia for something. You don't understand what it is, but then at the end, you understand the tragic moment of his life, the heavy past he had. You feel the nostalgia and you understand the sorrow, and it's what you said when you say it's like a ghost and everything. The mystery, I think that's the mystery of it.
I don't think they could have done better casting than Charles Bronson just because he's so reeled in and he's so subtle. And I love when he smiles.
Mhm.
It's not often, but when he does, it like really means something. It's just
It
wonderful.
happens twice in the movie.
Yeah. Every time it's just like, oh, that is so earned. His relationships with everybody too, especially Cheyenne, I think they just have a really good camaraderie about them and the way that they kind of team up to help the widow Jill get out from under, no pun intended, Frank.
The thing about Charles Bronson that helps make him so believable, as and I say this with affection, he has a face that's like old worn leather. He doesn't look like a polished Hollywood star, like a Robert Redford, just a handsome guy. This guy looks like he's been out there in the sun baking for a couple decades, and it gives it an authenticity.
Yeah, the visual juxtaposition of Charles Bronson and Henry Fonda. I mentioned this in the VHS video, but he was always the good guy. And this is pretty much the only time he played the villain, and he just let loose. Like anything he ever picked up from any villain he ever encountered before in film or the stage or life, he just brought right into Frank. I love every single thing he does with this character, and he's such a brutal, vicious, malicious character. There's so much malice and ice in this character that like he exists in the desert is like also just a testament to how fucking cold he is. He is like dry ice, he'll burn you.
I didn't really know this actor before, to be frank with you. I can understand that the Americans were shocked to see him playing a villain because his face inspires sympathy. I really feel that way when you watch the movie. You, even if he's a kind of a bastard, he inspires sympathy. And even during the sex scene, I didn't really know what to think because you're at the age of maybe it's gonna change. Oh no, he's not changing. He's still a bad guy. But you really don't know what to think about this guy during this scene.
When Fonda showed up to film, he had put in brown contact lenses and like grown a mustache and had dyed his hair kind of dark. And Leone was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Well, I'm playing the villain, so I'm looking like a villain." And he's like, No, I want Henry Fonda to be the villain. I don't want a villain played by Henry Fonda. I want Henry Fonda." And he explained the opening sequence of murdering the kid, and then the camera comes up and we see Henry Fonda with his piercing blue eyes, and he wants the audience to be like, "What the fuck?" That's not who should be standing on the other end of that gun. And so he wanted to play with the expectations and with the conventions of the audience and of the genre and of the characters. But I think that was probably the true detriment to the film in its day. A lot of people say that it was cutting out 20 or so minutes, which if you don't know it's there, it's like any deleted scene, like you're not necessarily going to miss it. It's not that it was, crippling to the story. If you know it, then yeah, it can be inhibiting. But if you don't know it, I think it was more the expectations of the audience with regard to Henry Fonda's presentation. I'm gonna die on that hill. I'll say it, I think that's what it was. And in the video, I compared it to Tom Hanks. He's another one where it's like, you can't really picture him playing a Frank kind of character. Not that he couldn't, not that he shouldn't, not that he won't someday, but the only time I could think of Tom Hanks really going down that road was Road to Perdition. And even that is still mostly Tom Hanks, it's like 51%. He's got that 1% in there over the darkness of that character. And whereas Henry Fonda, he is like 99%, he didn't put Mortimer down. And maybe that was even more evil than doing him the favor there, so maybe he's 101%.
It's always jarring when you see the hero play the villain.
But we talked about Henry Fonda and Charles Bronson, and even if I loved watching the two pairs of blue eyes confronting each other, my favorite character in this movie is definitely Cheyenne. I really love this character. It's really the big-hearted bandit, and you really have affection for him. Even when at the beginning you're not sure, you think maybe he's involved in the crime, but anyway, I really loved him anyway. Until the end, you want to see scenes with this guy, and he has the most, I mean, the funniest lines in the movie.
Yeah, Cheyenne definitely is an underrated character in this ensemble. He really, his persona and what Jason Robards does with the character and his delivery, like you said, he just has some of the best lines. He has some of the best insight to the situation. And I think that's partly why I think audiences really connect with him, because Cheyenne is almost like the guide, kind of commentating what's going on to this world. The way he explains things to Jill and wins her over is what he's doing with the audience. You know, he's explaining things to us through Jill and winning us over. And then the fact that he's kind of picking a side and teaming up with Harmonica.
I mean, all the great stuff he had there in the train escape when it comes to Harmonica's rescue, you know, the gun in the boot and, you know, stepping on the toilet to flush it as he's going out the window. A nice sprinkle of humor in there to kind of break up some of the tension.
I love when the guy gets thrown out of the train and he sees Cheyenne hanging out under the train, like he hitched the ride to like come along, and he tries to warn Frank, and Frank just like cuts him down, and Cheyenne's just like, I told you. You know, like just that humor in his character in the face of the darkness of Frank. You know, it's a nice levity that he brings to this story.
Now, thinking about what you said a few minutes ago about how you think that Harmonica might have been shot in the back, you know, by Frank's men, you know, I wonder maybe that's why, you know, Harmonica could have easily shot Frank in the back when he was dealing with his own men when they turn on him, but he doesn't. I mean, obviously wants to face him like a man and take him out, but that's an interesting point of view. Maybe like, I'm not going to do what you did, pal. I'll look you right in the eyes and shoot you.
Well, and it's making Frank confront his past, confront his demons, and confront all the wrongs that he's done. And that's why he keeps throwing the names of the dead men out at Frank. He's literally haunting him and then making him confront his past. And even at the end, like we get the insight of the incident with the brother and the noose and everything, but he cuts Frank down in that face-off, and Frank still wants to know who he is and why, and then he puts the harmonica in his mouth as he dies, and that's when it clicks. It's not like he tells Frank everything that we've gotten to see and experience. He tells him in that one act when he rips the harmonica off his neck, the way Frank put it in his mouth, and it's like, oh,
it's a beautiful little button on the end of that film.
The final scene, for me, it's definitely what makes this movie a masterpiece, because you have many symbols. First of all, Frank is in black and Harmonica is wearing white. And when you have the flashback, you can see that Frank is at the right of the screen and Harmonica and his brother are on the left. And when the duel is done, when Frank is dying, you can see that at the beginning of his death is on the right, and he falls down on the left, and you see Harmonica appearing in the back on the right of the screen. So the revenge is complete, you know. The scene is made again. This shot, so beautiful when you see that. You think Sergio Leone, he thought of everything. I mean, it's crazy. And just the beginning of the scene is fantastic, because you have a wide shot, and suddenly you have the harmonica music, and you see harmonica entering the field of vision. It's wow. I was really blown away when I watched this.
And this is the most excited I've seen you in a long time. This is maybe Westerns is your genre.
Definitely, yeah, maybe.
That's one thing with this film, you know, you watch it and then like what happened for me was I started to see through films that came after it. Like I got to see this film was like the source of a lot of inspiration, especially, and I mentioned this earlier with regard to Quentin Tarantino. You know, you watch this film and you instantly understand where Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is trying to come from. It doesn't exactly make the connecting flight, but even within the title, he's appropriating the title for his purposes. And he also is the one who gave Robert Rodriguez the title of Once Upon a Time in Mexico for the third El Mariachi film. And so you can see that thread of inspiration traced back through his filmography and subsequent filmographies that he's inspired.
The inspiration and the legacy has affected filmmakers. It has affected storytelling. It pops up, whether it be in a parody context, kind of like in The Burbs, or in very subtle nuance, like in The Dark Knight. So it's there. And like you said, in the titles of other films. So I think it has a massive effect on the world of film.
No, for me, the only criticism I have for this movie, of course, it's too long, and I think it would have been more impactful if it ended right after the battle, the final battle. Even if one of my favorite scenes is the death of Cheyenne, which is after that, but if at the end of the battle and we understand that the revenge is complete and everything, boom, the end, it will be so impactful.
Jill is the main character, and she's operating around these other like forces. If Harmonica is a phantom and he's a vengeance seeking phantom, and he gets his vengeance by killing Frank, and Cheyenne is kind of his redemptive, right? Because Cheyenne is a bad guy. He's a bandit. He escapes custody several times throughout the film, but he has sins that he has to atone for and pay for. And he does that by helping Jill and helping Harmonica. So now it's almost like that's earned him his passage to peace.
Yeah, I like that he dies doing something noble.
Yeah, like Harmonica is basically the angel of death, but he's still an angel. So now he's taking Cheyenne to heaven, essentially.
One of the questions I always walk away with is, why are Frank's men there to get Harmonica? Because Frank has no idea who he is.
This has long been my interpretation of the beginning is Harmonica, he says, where's Frank? He's expecting to see Frank, so he's probably tried to connect or contact Frank. Like he's trying to trap him into an instant showdown. And Frank, he can't even be bothered with it, so he sends henchmen to go like, well, go see what this Joker's about. I'm focused on Mr. Choo Choo and our plan for Sweetwater. So go see what this Joker wants. And when Frank doesn't show up and Harmonica mows him down, it's like, all right, well now we're into it. So I always kind of just figured like
I said, there was
some type of correspondence, some type of exchange that Frank blew off, and that's Frank, he can't be bothered with. That's why he doesn't even know who Harmonica is, because he never met him, because he never saw him. And so it's like, and Harmonica's not like, you were supposed to meet me at the train. Like that doesn't happen because he wasn't there.
Right. The only other small question I had is why do both Cheyenne and Harmonica kind of simultaneously agree to help Jill?
Well, Cheyenne sees something in Jill that reminds him of his mother, and nobody ever helped her, so he's going to help her.
That's correct with the tea conversation. Correct. Yeah. Overall, I mean, it's such a great film. I would like to see it on the big screen.
Yeah, me too.
I got to see it at the Alamo Drafthouse a couple of years ago. It was unreal seeing it in the theater on the big screen. And you think they zoom into Charles Bronson's eyes at the end on the TV? Wait till he's on the side of a building, man. And you're like actually seeing his thoughts through his pupils. It's incredible. With Morricone's score and surround sound coming at you.
Hopefully they'll do it again soon.
Amazing. Beautiful. But that will about do it for us here today at the Visually Hidden Selects podcast. We will be discussing a completely different film next time, so be sure to head over to our YouTube channel and subscribe so you don't miss any future recommendations. You can catch Stephen Bendler on Instagram over at Steve's Pop Culture Corner. Anne and I, of course, are also on Instagram as well as Letterboxd, so you can follow us over there and check out what we've watched and see what we think. And until next time, keep your loving brother happy.